Well, Ben Wexler, showrunner, executive producer of The Comedians, now in its, I guess, fifth or sixth week here on FX. Tell us, as we get started on this chat, Billy Crystal, people have been after him for 30 years to do a TV series, and I'm sure he's had lots of opportunities and lots of chances. How do you go about getting him to do this one?
Well, this show was based on a Swedish format that was sent to me and to Billy separately by a producer who had secured the rights from the Swedish program, and he saw it and he loved it. And lucky for all of us, we sort of fell into this project that he was interested in doing. So that was frankly kind of serendipity. I think the fact that we all got together and made a show that we really love and are proud of is sort of icing on the cake. But yeah, to get him interested in doing television after all this time was absolutely a coup for sure.
And we interviewed Josh Gad a couple of weeks ago, so people can watch that separately from this. But he's one of the hottest rising young stars and comedians and actors going. Was he first choice, or did you look at a lot of people? How did you make that connection with him?
No, Josh was literally the only person we met with for the role. Billy had, I think, seen him in Book of Mormon on Broadway and suggested him one day as we were talking about who was going to be this other guy. Billy suggested Josh. We all were familiar with his work and really were huge fans. Larry Charles, who directed the pilot and several other episodes, I think had a project in development with Josh, so we literally knew him personally. And we brought him in for a meeting at Billy's office. I think it was on a Saturday, and we talked for, we assumed it was going to be about an hour or so. We sat there for like 2.5 hours. And it was kind of like watching two guys who had known each other forever. I mean, it was this amazing, just sort of like this comedy team was being born in this room when the two of those guys sat down. We just he left and we just looked at each other, and Billy's joke is cancel the call to Jack Black. But it was pretty clear at that point that that Josh was the guy, and we never looked back. It was a really lucky process. I mean, it doesn't usually go that fast. Usually you do have to look at 20 or 30 or 100 or 200 people, and he just came in and we knew it was him.
So that first meeting was much better than the one on the fictional pilot.
Oh no, they also then actually recreated. No, yeah, it was much better than the one in the fictional pilot. That was a we knew that the way the show had to start was that it was going to get off to a rocky start right off the bat. So hopefully people out there realize that these guys are playing versions of themselves, and that the relationship of Billy and Josh on The Comedians is actually very different than the relationship between Billy and Josh in real life. They actually really like each other a lot, which makes my job easier.
Well, that's a good question about tone, because they are playing versions of themselves. I'm sure there were a lot of discussion. I mean, that's difficult to do. I think there's been many people have done that over the course of especially television, but to know that you're going to be playing a version that people will now think that they're like that.
Well, I would almost argue that the degree of difficulty in our show is almost greater than the shows that have come before, just because Billy is such an icon and such a known quantity that we really had a very specific needle to thread when we were sort of crafting the character of Billy Crystal. I mean, he's this known quantity. He's been we've all known him for 30, 40 years. He's been an incredibly iconic entertainer for all these years. And I think that on some level, we knew that we could only take so much liberty with his actual persona before it started to feel fake. I mean, we took great pains to make it feel like this is the real Billy Crystal that we just happened to be watching behind the scenes. And he was brave enough and game enough to kind of portray himself as a little bit more of a curmudgeonly guy than he really is in real life, which makes the show funny. And he's obviously in on the joke, and he knows that that's part of the humor of the show. But I think we had to find that tone and figure out sort of how mean is too mean, or how much conflict do we want to see between these two guys before you just get turned off and want to stop watching. And so honestly it was a process of trial and error, but I mean, as I say, we're really proud of it, and I'm really kind of in awe of those guys for taking this on, because it is a very risky and kind of gutsy thing to do, to portray yourself, not just a character, but a guy who's named Billy Crystal or a guy who's named Josh Gad. It's a different acting job for sure.
Well, and you talk about tone, but the tone does gradually move, just like it would in anybody. I mean, you get a new coworker in your job, and over time, things change, your relationship changes, and I think that's no more relevant than an episode people will see here, I guess, in about 3 weeks, called Billy's Birthday, which I loved.
Yeah,
and there's such a nice emotional lift to that episode.
Well, our plan going in was always that this is really a show about the relationship between these two guys and the friendship that sort of forms between these two guys, and it's less a show about show business. None of us were really interested in just totally getting into the weeds and the minutia of the making of a show. We really wanted to do a character comedy, and so the plan coming in was always to watch as the relationship deepens between these two human beings. And that episode that you point out, Billy's Birthday, is a real turning point in the season-long arc of their relationship, because it's kind of the first time, I don't want to give too much away, but it's kind of the first time they really go out together as friends, and it's the first time that they kind of have a real sort of honest moment as two sort of vulnerable individuals. I think people hopefully are gonna love that episode as much as you did, and as much as I do. But yeah, I think the whole season is sort of a long process, as you say. You meet somebody, you start to work with them. They're not going to be your best friend on day one, and there's going to be fits and starts. In the case of our show, it's exacerbated by the fact that these guys are both kind of vying for supremacy in a creative endeavor, which hopefully forms the conflict and the sparks. But ultimately, as these guys learn to trust each other and learn to know each other a little bit, it gets more interesting. I would say stay tuned.
Well, people I think have seen the first 4 or 5 on FX.
4, yeah.
And I've seen 4. 9 out of the 13, so I can't wait to see those last 4.
Yeah.
Tell me about just you yourself. There's so many laugh out loud moments during the season. Some are just things they mutter under their breath, and some are like big gags. What made you laugh the most? Maybe what moment this season?
Well, I mean, off the top of my head, the moment in the pilot where Josh asks what 700 Sundays was about, and then Billy says it's about how my dad died when I was 15, and then Josh starts laughing, thinking that he's joking. For some reason, that always gets me. I was, in terms of the big laughs on set, when Stephanie Weir's stomach grumbled, also in the pilot, that was real. That was 100% not scripted. None of us saw that coming. She just happened to have a microphone sitting like right here, under her shirt, and the mic picked up this egregiously loud stomach growl. And God bless, Josh and Stephanie both stayed in the scene and sort of made it a part of the scene. And that absolutely killed me. And then the other thing, as I'm thinking of it, is there's a moment in an episode that hasn't aired, and this will be an outtake for DVD extras. But at the end of the scene, on the last take, I just told Stephanie, it's a scene between Stephanie and Josh, and I just said, it's a scene where basically he gives her news that makes her incredibly relieved, and at the end she hugs him, and she kind of hugs him for a little bit too long. And on this take, I just said, just basically just rape him, just basically like attack him sexually. And that went on for about 5 minutes of the funniest improv I've ever seen. And she was just kind of like continuing to try to hug him and not let go, and he was just creeped out by it. And I'm not doing it justice, but the two of them are unbelievably hilarious together.
The other thing about this show is it's on FX. The fictional variety series they do is on FX. You've got a fictional FX president and Dennis O'Hare. Yeah. So I guess my question would be, what was there anything off limits in terms of what FX did or did not want you to say about them?
Well, they were resistant, to be totally candid. They were a little bit resistant at first about us calling the network FX. They wanted it to be the network, just that there was this show and that we would portray network executives, but they would be sort of from an unnamed network. And we gently asked them, would you please let us call it FX? Because we just think there's a certain the snake eating its own tail quality to the idea of a show on FX about the making of a show on FX. And ultimately, we only had to ask once, and then they said yes. And they've really embraced the idea of this kind of doppelganger version of FX and this doppelganger version of the president of FX, who is played by Dennis O'Hare, but is really nothing like the real John Landgraf. I have to say I admire not only Billy and Josh for being able to take this on and make play versions of themselves where they're making fun of themselves. FX has really done the same thing. I mean, they're really they really have a sense of humor about themselves. We have a joke in an upcoming episode where the president of the network is asking them to do something, and he says, well, we are the network that put Charlie Sheen on the air, and I remember at the table read. When that line came up, looking at the FX executives, and they were laughing hysterically, and it was exactly the reaction you would want in that moment. But I remember just kind of being like, are they going to laugh or are they going to hate that? To their credit, they loved it. So.
One recent episode was the guest star episode where Billy's trying to get Mel Brooks to come on the show, and of course, again, it's very snake eating the tail. Mel Brooks is on the episode, and that's a rarity too. You don't see him often doing these kinds of things anymore. I have a question about that too, but just tell us about working with him.
Oh, it was literally a dream come true. I couldn't believe every minute of sitting with that guy was I had to pinch myself. I mean, I think you talk to just about anybody in comedy, and he's your hero. And Billy, by the way, feels the same way. I think that guy meant more to my childhood probably than anybody but my parents and my grandparents. I mean, he really is such a huge reason why I even wanted to do funny stuff with my life, for a living. So sitting with him, there were times that we spent a lot of time with him actually, because he wanted to really get comfortable with us and get comfortable with the idea of what he was doing in the episode. So Billy and Larry and I wound up probably having 3 meetings in his office that lasted about an hour and a half each. And there were times that I had to remind myself as I'm staring in awe at Mel Brooks, that also the guy across the desk is pretty big deal too. It's Billy Crystal, and I was like, there's my coworker who I talk to every day, but there's Mel Brooks, and it was this amazing sort of seeing the two of these guys in the same room was to me worth the price of admission on that episode. It was really, really amazing. And yeah, we had one joke, which we didn't wind up putting in the episode, but as Mel is telling Billy, you shouldn't have a guest star. Guest stars never work. It's a gimmick, whatever. Then he looks in the documentary cameras and he goes, what are these anyway? And Billy's like, just ignore them. It's just some documentary that they're making. We didn't wind up putting that in, but the irony hopefully came through anyway, that it was like, we had a huge guest star saying, don't have a guest star.
I would love, man, that would be killer to see those 90-minute sessions. That you should have secretly taped those, but when you went in to meet with him.
I'm not saying I did, but I'm not saying I didn't.
Just for your own personal collection.
At one point he called Carl Reiner at home because we brought him a pastrami sandwich from Langer's, which we had on the set because we were shooting with real pastrami from the great deli in downtown LA, Langer's, and we brought Mr. Brooks a sandwich, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to bring this over to Carl Reiner's house tonight." And I think I was like, I've officially died and gone to comedy heaven now. And he called Mr. Reiner at the end of the meeting and said, "I'm bringing the sandwich over," and I wished my parents could have been there to see. It was so cool.
Well, in that same episode, you have the Lopez couple duo, who Robert now is an EGOT winner, just like Mel Brooks is, and they worked with Josh on Frozen, and to me, I mean, they were very funny. But that song that they did, and then Billy and Josh doing that toward the end of that episode, that was one of the true highlights of the whole season.
It's the first time we heard that song. I first of all, meeting them was literally as much of a dream come true. I'm such a huge fan of Kristen, Bobby, and I mean, it's really an amazing thing to see. They are the best at what they do right now. There's a small niche of thing called writing funny songs, and they are the best at it, in my opinion, anyway. So, they had this idea. We knew we wanted them on the show, and Josh, through his friendship with them, was able to get them to do it, which I think we were really lucky to get. When they played that song for us the first time, I remember looking at Billy and thinking, like, I can't believe we get to put this song on our show. It was the entertainment value was crazy to me. I mean, we were so lucky to have them, and they were, same deal. They were game. They played versions of themselves. It was an incredible week, really, to be among. Yeah, you're right. I think there are 9 EGOT winners or something like that. We had 2 of them in the same episode. What other show can tell you that?
That's right. Well, in advance of that, I didn't tell them who. But like weeks before that aired in our forums, I said, there's an episode coming up with 2 EGOT winners. Can you guess who they are? And of course, most people were guessing Whoopi Goldberg because of her friendship with Billy, but
right.
Nobody guessed that particular combo.
How many Rita Moreno guesses were there? Were there any?
I don't think anybody guessed Rita, and unfortunately, nobody guessed Richard Rogers, who died about 40 years ago. But
it would have been a bad guess.
That would be a get.
That would be that would be a big get.
Well, I hope you don't forget to submit that song in the original song category for the Emmys.
Hopefully somebody's on top of that.
Well, listen, speaking of Emmys, I'm certainly pulling for this to do really well. I hope people will really take a chance to watch the whole season, because the tone does shift and the friendship does develop, and there's so many laugh out loud moments. I don't think there's a better comedy on TV today, really.
Wow, thank you. That means a ton, and obviously we're partial. We think so too, but to hear it come from somebody else is amazing. Thank you.
Well, good luck with that. We'll be watching for those Emmy nominations in July, and I'm hoping for a season 2. I hope that announcement comes very soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was great talking to you.